So this show is dedicated to travel, journeys, all kinds of journeys. And so to start this off, we're going to take you on a journey through time, a musical journey. I know most of you know when you hear a song, it takes you back to a time and a place. And this is what it did for me when I heard Bill Zarcy do this tune in a class at Stagebridge. And I thought it would be appropriate to start and show off with this. In the still of the night, I held you tight, 'cause I love you so. Promise I'll never let you go. In the still of the night, in the still of the night, I remember that night in May. I remember the stars so bright above. I remember and I'll remember to keep your precious love well before the light for me again with all of your mind in the still of the night, in the still of the night. I remember that night in May. The stars so bright above. I'll remember and I'll pray to keep your precious love well before about where you were back in the day if you were born during that time.
And if you want an encore, that's our only song.
Quick while you're here. Thank you, Bill.
Why is your Jesus better than my Jesus? This one young woman asked me. I didn't have an answer for her. I'm flipping through the Bible. I got nothing. How did I get here? I'm in El Salvador trying to convince a bunch of people that my church has the right religion and theirs is wrong. Well, the way it happened was I was around 16 in 1966 and I just got foster parents. My father had died, my mother had been dead for a few years, and my twin sister and I got foster parents, and they were born again Pentecostals. Now, my father had been a Presbyterian. Presbyterians, they go to church once a week, and maybe there's a potluck, but they're good. After that, they're good all week. The Pentecostals, they go to Sunday school, they go to service, they go to evening service. They go to Wednesday service. There's a youth group on Friday. Oh my God. They go to church all the time. And they believe that everybody who doesn't believe like them are going to hell. Maybe not the Southern Baptists, but pretty much everybody else. They are. So it became clear to my sister and I that we were going to have to buy into their religion to be accepted and loved. So I bought the program. I went in and got saved and found Jesus. It never really felt like enough. I really wanted my parents to love me and accept me, but so when our pastor, Willis, came up with this missionary trip to Central America, I thought, oh, this might be great. It was young people. There were 20 of us. I signed up. My sister didn't want to go down and save the Catholics, because they particularly thought the Catholics were in a very bad situation. And, what with the Pope and all, it was. So I sign up, and Pastor Willis, bless his heart, he's like this tall, and he's bald, and he has little wisps of hair. I don't think he thought this through. He rented 4 used Volkswagen buses and a Mercedes-Benz. He thought, well, it'll be easy to drive from Livermore to Central America. Well, so the first thing Pastor Willis didn't really think about, he was worried we're going to get malaria. So he brought malaria pills for all of us. And then he thought, well, if one is good, 3 is better. Here, take some more. So, of course, some of us were getting sick with malaria. We, one night we stayed in this beautiful, sweet little Spanish-style motel with gardens. And, by that time we were hot and tired, and a shower was really welcome. And we knew in Mexico that you don't drink the water, at least in those days. And so we were very careful. They had big water dispensers, big bottles of water all over the place, and that was what we were very careful to drink out of. So the next day when we're pulling out, we see the gardener with the garden hose filling up the water dispensers. So most of you probably know the term turista. We got that. As we were traveling down, we were hot and stinky and tired, and we pulled over to a beach one evening. Well, it was lovely. It was beautiful, and as it got to be dusk, 10 million mosquitoes came in, and we were eaten alive. So not only on the bus sitting there with these other problems in existence, then we were scratching these running sores of mosquitoes. Oh, Pastor Willis did not think this through. So we get to Central America, El Salvador, San Salvador actually, and we stay in dorms, but I'm still really sick. Just couldn't go out and go do the door-to-door with our little Spanish-English Bibles, but finally I did. Went down, the people were just lovely. And I was really struggling with this idea now, how am I going to tell these people that, well, our one and true religion is the right way and everybody else is pretty much going to hell? I just was really struggling with this. And when this young woman came up to me, and long black hair in their 20s, and said, why is your Jesus better than my Jesus? I got nothing. I said, you're right, and I walked away, and a few days later we left, went back home. My parents never really loved us any more than they did before. But I tell you what, nowadays I let people decide for themselves what you want to believe or not believe. And I don't know if there is a heaven or a hell. and maybe you do, but let's just all decide that we get to decide for ourselves what is the right way for us.
So we decided a few weeks ago to set travel as a theme, travel stories. And I started to think about different stories that I had. Some tourist stories with my family in Europe, different things, funny things, serious things that had happened. Some business travel stuff from my years on the road, shooting films, interesting things that happened, usually cultural clash in Asia and in other parts of the world. But there's another kind of travel that I think is really interesting to pursue, and that's when people leave their homes and they move to another city or another country or another continent. I'm talking about immigration. This is a story about immigration, and it's a cherished story in my family. About a little over 20 years ago, right around the end of the 20th century, my Aunt Evelyn and Uncle Saul had an extra ticket to a show. It was a Cole Porter Revue, and their kids couldn't go with them, and so they reached out to a group of Russian Jewish immigrants, recent Russian Jewish immigrants, who lived near them down on the peninsula. And their main friend there couldn't go herself, but she recommended a friend of hers, who my aunt and uncle didn't know, who she thought would really appreciate the music. His name was Alex Levy, and they picked up Alex. Evelyn and Saul picked up Alex, and he seemed like a nice enough guy. Kind of quiet, spoke with a very heavy accent, which I can't really do. And they got to the theater, and Alex looked at the program. He said, "What show of Cole Porter is this?" He said, "I know all his shows, but I don't know this one called Revue." And my aunt explained that it wasn't a whole show, it was songs from different Cole Porter shows. No dramatic setting, but just one song after another. But she was intrigued because she'd met a lot of Russians, particularly recent Russian immigrants. And very few of them knew anything about American culture, especially esoteric things like show tunes of the 30s. And she said, "Well, Alex, how is it that you know about Cole Porter?" He said, "Oh, I come from a very musical family. My mother was a piano player. I play piano too, but not like her." And my aunt said, "Really, that's very interesting. And where do you come from in Russia?" And he said, "I grew up in Leningrad, lived there my whole life. My mother, my father, they met there, they married. That's where I was born. I lived there till I came here to California. I lived in Leningrad. But my mother wasn't from Leningrad. She came from a tiny little village. You never heard of it. It's called Velizh." And Evelyn and Saul were kind of shocked. And just then the show started and they couldn't talk anymore. But they were very excited to hear this because they had heard of Velizh. Because nearly 100 years before that, around the beginning of the 20th century, 3 teenage girls from Velizh had emigrated to the United States. Their names were Anna, Bessa, and Chippa. Anna was my grandmother. Anna was Evelyn's mother, my father's mother. Anna, Bessa, and Chippa were fleeing the pogroms. The Cossack soldiers would come in and they would rape and pillage and burn the villages and kill the Jewish people. And the family was eager to get. They had 3 passages to the U.S. One of the other daughters turned down going to the U.S. at the last minute because she had a boyfriend in Velizh. But Anna, Bessa, and Chippa came here. They got on a ship in Hamburg. They sailed. They sailed across the ocean, not with sails, of course. They rode in steerage, which meant they had no cabins. They were below decks in one big open area with poor food and no privacy and limited sanitation facilities. And they got to New York Harbor and they disembarked in Ellis Island, like most European immigrants. And they were kept in Ellis Island for several days, poked and prodded, their medical records examined. The immigration officials were very concerned that they have a sponsor in New York. In immigration situations, you had to have someone who would guarantee that they would take care of you, so you weren't coming in and immediately going to be in poverty in the U.S. And after a few days on Ellis Island, they were released, and they went to Manhattan and Brooklyn, where they had family and friends. And they stayed in the New York, New Jersey area the rest of their lives. Never went back to Russia. Eventually had families, but they tried very hard to keep in touch with the family back in Valige. And all through the 19-teens, through the World War I and the 1920s, they did keep in touch. They sent photographs, they wrote letters back and forth, they sent photographs of their new lives, their families growing up. The New York family sent back to Russia. They got back photographs and letters from the family in Valige. They, occasionally the New York family would send packages with books or clothing or packaged foods. And they tried to stay in touch like that, but they realized when the Great Depression hit in particular that things were not going well for the family in Valige or for Jews in Russia in general. They tried to stay in touch, but they were thwarted at many turns. One day they got a letter from a woman from Valige saying, "Do not write to your family in Valige anymore. They are under suspicion. Do not send them packages or books. They are under scrutiny. The secret police think that they are spies. They think all Jews are spies, and they are being watched very carefully. Instead, send your letters to me, and I will take them to your family. And if they have letters back to you, I will mail them for you. I am a Gentile. I'm not Jewish. I'm not under scrutiny. They won't suspect me." So this led to great consternation on the part of the family in New York. What to do? Should they trust this woman? If this was in fact a woman, they had no guarantee that this was a real person. They didn't want to play into the hands of the government or the police. So the correspondence back and forth slowed down, and eventually it ground nearly to a halt. And the family in New York, didn't think about their roots in Valige very much. And they had left behind quite a big family. Besides Anna, Bessa, and Chippa, there were 3 or 4 other siblings. The youngest was a piano prodigy named Sonia, and there were several other kids. And the mother of this brood of 7 or 8 was a woman named Bella. And the father, Bella's husband, the father of the seven kids, was named Meyer. And because he had red hair, he was known as Meyer de Geller, which is Meyer the redhead in Yiddish. And Meyer de Geller was a well-known klezmer musician. He played in klezmer bands at weddings and other kinds of occasions. And a great teacher of music. Taught all his kids music and was very much involved in Valige and surrounding communities. He was the place where people sent their kids for piano lessons and other instrumental lessons. Now, things kind of slowed down. The correspondence between the 2 branches of the family slowed down. But everyone in New York was startled to read in the New York Times around 1942, 43, that the German armies, on their way to invading Russia, had stopped in Valige and had stayed there for a while. And then one day, apparently under new orders, the Nazi soldiers rounded up all the Jews in the town, and they herded them into several barns, and they nailed them shut, and they set fire to them. And if anyone broke out through a window or a door, they were machine gunned to death. And in their very efficient, horrible way, the German army, in 2 days, managed to slaughter over 1,400 innocent civilians. Now, meanwhile, back to Alex. The intermission came in the Cole Porter show, and Evelyn and Saul said, Evelyn said, "So, Alex, you come from Valige. What was your mother's name?" He said, my mother was a concert pianist. She was a wonderful woman. I still miss her. Her name was Sonia." And Saul said, he was very shocked. Saul said, "Alex, what was your mother's name?" "Oh, my grandmother. She should rest in peace. I can still taste her blintzes. She was a wonderful woman. Her name was Bella." And Saul said, "And what was Bella's husband's name, Sonia's father?" And he said, "Oh, my grandfather, his name was Meyer." And Evelyn and Saul got really excited, and Saul said, "Meyer de Geller." And Alex said, yes, yes, how do you know? And Evelyn and Saul were so excited, they were jumping around. And Alex got really excited too, although he had no idea why. And Evelyn explained that she was also the grandchild of Bella and Meyer de Geller, and that she and Alex were first cousins. Now, after the show, they took Alex back home to his apartment. They met his wife, and he got out the photo album that his mother had left, that he had inherited from his mother. And in the photo album were pictures that Evelyn could remember seeing that her mother, Anna, my grandmother, there were pictures in Alex's album of that Evelyn could remember her own mother bringing with her from Russia when they emigrated. There were pictures of the New York family in the Valise album. And they knew now for sure that Evelyn and Alex were cousins. So the next few weeks were very exciting. Evelyn and Saul spread the word among the family. They enjoyed introducing Alex to different members of the family. One day they were driving down Foothill Expressway. They lived on the peninsula down around Los Altos. They were driving down Foothill Expressway, and they realized that coming in the opposite direction were Alex and his wife. And they honked their horn, and Alex honked his horn, and they waved, and they thought, what a remarkable coincidence. And a few weeks later, the same thing happened on a different road. They're driving down the road, and there are Alex and they wave and they honk their horns. And they realized that in the 8 years that Alex had lived 5 miles away from them, they probably passed on the road numerous times without knowing. A few weeks later, there was a family reunion in San Jose. It was my Uncle Saul's 75th birthday, I believe. And they discovered, as they did a wider search for cousins, that there were other cousins, other descendants of Meyer de Geller and Bella, who lived in Minnesota and had emigrated fairly recently and didn't speak very good English, but they came out for the reunion. And so my father and his sister, my Aunt Evelyn, sat at a table at this party with a group of Russian cousins whose very existence they hadn't even known about up until a few weeks before that. So my kids were trying to make sense of this. And our son Razi said, so Daddy, is this like if Danny and I didn't see each other for a long time and then we did? I said, no, what this is like is if you and your brother, God forbid, for some horrible reason, never saw each other again for the rest of your lives, and then 100 years later, on the other side of the world, your children met each other and realized they were family. That's what this was like. Thank you.
My story is also about migration, but it's internal migration. I'm gonna take a sentimental journey home. I'm gonna take a sentimental journey to a place where I belong. My first journey in life was leaving Shreveport, Louisiana, sometime in the 40s, to join my father in San Francisco, who was working in the shipyards, building ships for the war effort. And he left Louisiana for better opportunity. But more important, he left Louisiana and he told my mother, my 2 sisters, I'm leaving for better opportunity, but I'm also leaving because of Jim Crow. And my mother, my sisters, we were devastated. But he said, I don't want you to grow up in this cruel, hostile system. My sisters and I, we had no idea what Jim Crow was. We thought Jim Crow was a person, an individual. So he left and he was gone for 2 solid years. We didn't see him until one day he wrote a letter and said, Come on, I got a house, I got a new car. We've got means come out of that mean old South. And so my grandmother, she was devastated. She said, how can you go so far away? I'll never see you again. And my mother said, we can't stay down here, Mama. It's too dangerous. I don't want to raise my kids down here. The Ku Klux Klan just hung a black man right up the road. I got to go. And so one morning we packed everything up, and my grandmother, she's crying all the way to the train station. She said, y'all will never see me again. You won't even write me. I know. You're going all the way out to California, 2,000 miles. My mother said, Mama, we got to go. And so we boarded a train. And when we get on the train, I'm 4 or 5 years old. I know something is wrong. This train that we get on, this coach, was a cattle car. It was the colored car, right behind the engine. And I could look through the back of the coach that we were in, and I could see a beautiful coach with ceiling fans swirling, curtains, cushioned seats, little kids bouncing up and down. And I turned to my mom and says, let's go back there. And my mother looks at me and she says, son, we can't go back there. And I said, why not? She said, because that's the coach for white folks. This is the coach for black folks. I said, why? She said, because it's Jim Crow. And I said, that's not fair. That's not fair, as any little kid would say. And my sister said the same thing in chorus. That's not fair. My mother said, hush. Quiet, y'all. Don't make no trouble. That's why we're going to California. No Jim Crow out there. No siree. No Jim Crow in California. Boom. Fast forward to 1953. Family had grown from 3 kids to 6 kids. My father had just purchased a 1953 Buick Hornet. You know what those kind of cars were? Big cars. And my dad piled us all in that car that July month, and we drove to Louisiana. He was the only one that could drive. My mom didn't drive. 6 kids in the car. But Jim Crow, I had a better understanding of Jim Crow by that time, and we got the lecture, the talk. Don't look white folks in the eye, say yes sir, no sir, and no confrontation. Be cool and stay close to us. Okay, and we driving, and there was no stopping along the road. We had the Green Book. Y'all all know what the Green Book is, right? We had the Green Book, but we couldn't afford a hotel or a motel in the colored part of the town. So we packed all our stuff in. Pops would pull on the side of the road, take a little nap. If we found a colored bathroom, it was dirty, it was nasty. Most of the time we didn't. My mom would take the girls on one side of the field and use the bathroom. We'd go on the other side of the field. But we made it. For the kids, it wasn't that stressful. But for my parents, when I look back on it, black man, 6 kids, going down through the gates of hell, it must have been for him in the 50s. But we made it. Now fast forward to 2022. Another journey. My old beloved Volvo died on me in 2021. I thought I'd never have to get another car in my life, but it was going to cost me too much to restore it. And so my son is kind of a car person. He said, Dad, go and get your car, probably be the last one you get an EV, an electric vehicle. I said, oh man, I don't know about those. You know I'm in the business. Now he is an engineer, he works in Taiwan, and he builds batteries for electric vehicles. and he's been trying to get me into an electric vehicle. He says, do this for me, do this for the grandkids, do this for the planet. So I took a leap of faith and I bought an all-electric vehicle. And right around that time, it was a family reunion in Shreveport, Louisiana. And I said, hey man, let's take this bad boy on the world through the South. And that we did. And he showed me how to, put all the destination points where we wanted to stop. And I said, this will be a good time for us to bond. And we took Route 66. And we got our old kicks too along the way. But it was a totally different trip. And I was telling him about this trip that we took back in the 50s with my dad in 53. And he was like, oh man, I can't believe it was like that back in the day. You mean y'all couldn't stop? You couldn't go to the bathroom? I said, hey man, it was bad. It was bad. It was worse than that. So here we are cruising around in an electric vehicle. We've got a navigation system. We've got our smartphones. And he says, where do you want to stay? I think we can get to Phoenix the first night out. And he says, okay, you take over the driving. I'm going to book a hotel. I say, okay, book a hotel that's got a pool and a fitness center. He says, cool, we could do that. And he says, I'm going to make sure that they got an electric charging station too. Cool. And that's how we did it all along the way. Boop, boop, boop. Where you want to eat? Hey, they got some soul food, they got some seafood, got some barbecue, boom, boom, boom. We hooked up. And I'm telling them about what we had to do, eat out of a paper bag, sardines, food that we had packed before we left. And I'm comparing all this. The trip is going beautiful. But then we cruise through New Mexico, right outside of Las Cruces. And all of a sudden, flashing lights. Black man's worst nightmare. The police behind us. And I said, oh, shit. And I said, I don't know why they stopping us. We're only going 86 in the 80-mile-an-hour zone. And I look over at my son. I said, be cool, Z. That's his name. Be cool. And he looks at me and says, no, you be cool. Sound like you upset. I said, okay. And he says, another thing, let me do the talking because I'm driving. I said, what? He says, yeah, I'm driving. I said, okay. And so the cop saunters up to the vehicle on the passenger side. I let the window down. And he says, I stopped you gentlemen because you were going 86 miles an hour in a 65-mile-an-hour zone. And I said, what, 65? My son said, officer, the sign said 80. He said, no, 65, construction zone. My son looked at me and said, you riding shotgun, Dad, you didn't see that? I said, no, I didn't. And so the cop says, let me see your license. Takes the license, goes back to his vehicle, runs a make on him. He's clean. He comes back and he starts asking my son questions about the car. Hey, what does that dual motor mean on this vehicle? And the son gets real technical. Oh, we got one in the front, one in the back. It keeps it cool, it circulates, yada, yada, yada. Well, how do you know where to charge? Oh, we got a navigation system here, dee-dee-dee-dee-dee. Oh, he just runs it down. And I'm thinking, oh man, we might get out of this. And he said, well, I'll be damned. That's a hell of a vehicle. But I'm not ready for it. Maybe I get a hybrid later on, but I can't do all. And then he gives my son's license back. He says, you gentlemen have a good trip and be careful out here when it comes to these construction zones. We got to get our folks safe when they're taking care of this highway. We say, thank you, officer. We drive off and a sigh of relief. Whew. And so I'm keen on watching the speed limit now. So we get to the family reunion. Everybody wants to know about this electric vehicle because they're all into oil, all my relatives. They've got oil fields on some of their land. They work in the gas industry. They work in the oil industry. And we got this little thing back and forth. We're always going to need oil. No, we got to get rid of oil. We got to make this move. And then they want to know, well, how was your trip? I said, oh man, it was beautiful. I said, boy, things have changed. I was telling my son how racist it used to be. We came through New Mexico, Texas, Louisiana, no problem. In fact, we were speeding and got a ticket, didn't get a ticket, should have got a ticket, and the cop let us walk. I said, man, things have changed down here. Look how far we have come over the years. Jim Crow is dead and gone. And then my cousin Joe pulled my coattail. He said, hey, cuz, come over here and let me talk to you. I said, okay. We sat down. He said, listen, I'm glad you had a good trip down here. And I'm glad you were treated quite well. He said, but Jim Crow, it ain't gone. It ain't dead. It's alive and well. I said, what you mean, man? You know, we stayed in nice hotels. White folks was calling me sir. You know, what do you mean? He said, well, I'll tell you. He said, you know why they were so nice to you? Because they know you don't live here. You ain't gonna be here. You gonna take them California plates on your car and go back to Cali. So they can afford to be nice to you. He said, but we holding on, cuz. He said, you know about voter suppression. They taking our votes from us, man. You got a misdemeanor, they gonna try to tell you can't vote. They breaking up our districts, gerrymandering. We don't have representatives in DC or in the state capitol anymore like we used to. Our vote is being undermined. We're being disenfranchised. And you know the cemetery up there in Sugar Hill where all our relatives are buried? I said, yeah. The oil company is trying to lay claim to it. They taking the cemetery land, and we got a big lawsuit on now. The people couldn't even go and visit their loved ones because the oil company had chained off the property. But we did get a stay. And so we're raising funds now. You need to write a check before you leave. And I said, okay, I could do that. And I said, damn, man, I didn't know it was. He said, yeah. He said, now I know things ain't bad as they used to be when you was down here. He said, but they ain't near about as good or as right as they should be. He said, now you go on back to California and I hope you have a good trip. But you tell our people back there that we're gonna need their help. Just like y'all sent us that help in the 60s with SNCC and the NAACP, because Jim Crow is a shapeshifter. It changes its form every time. And man, throughout the reception, the reunion, his conversation was ringing through my head. And when my son and I drove back, we talked about it. And the only logical conclusion we came up with was, in spite of all of the progress, there's still a lot to be done. So I looked at my son and I said, you know, Z, the way I see this, it's based on something I read one time in a book. The more things change, the more they stay the same. The struggle continues. Thank you.
Just a reminder that the ancestors are here with us and calling them forth. My story is called Graham Crackers and Milk, and it's a story of trust and survival. Why Graham Crackers and Milk? Well, because it takes place about 60 years ago when I was in first grade. And one of the things I liked about kindergarten was Graham Crackers and Milk. And I thought, well, they're probably going to have Graham Crackers and Milk in first grade also. And indeed, they did. They did have that. And that was fabulous. Now, my school was a beautiful school. It wasn't very old at that particular point in time. My teacher would stand at the door, the front door to our our classroom. It was sort of like an open mall, right, with the classrooms pointing towards the east. That particular classroom was the last one. There were a bank of windows all along that front side facing the recess, the yard where we had recess. And she would stand at that door, and we would line up in a boys and girls line, as we did back then. And she was very, very tall, dressed with always a black dress. I thought perhaps she was always in mourning. I didn't know. I had aunts that dressed in that fashion, all in black, maybe a white collar. She wore her hair in a bun, and her hair was gray. And I know that the kids were scared of her. She had a nose that was long. And I know that the kids were scared of her because I hear even now that they were afraid of her. But I didn't find her scary at all. I was so excited to be there because Miss Estel, as she was called, taught me how to read. And it was Dick and Jane and See Spot Run and all of that, right? But I was in the Bluebird group, the high group, and you could tell that she had these different groups, and luckily I was able to decode and be in the high group there. She also would sit us in alphabetical order, and I would be at the very end, the very last desk, because my name started with the letter Z. And there were times where I would look over people's shoulders to look to see what they were doing, because sometimes I couldn't see the blackboard. They were still black then. I couldn't see what she wrote. I didn't wear glasses at that time, but I couldn't see the blackboard. So I would look over to see what other kids were doing, to see if my work kind of looked the same. I really don't think that I was cheating. I really don't think that I was cheating. I really wasn't. Now, I remember how excited I was to read Harold and the Purple Crayon for the first time. And Danny and the Dinosaur was just great. But there was a time that we had a library, and we were able to go to the library, and I found a book that really fascinated me, and I pulled it out, and it was by a guy by the name of John Hershey. Hershey, I love that name, right? That was my favorite candy bar, was a Hershey bar. It still is to this day. It was what I would pay myself when I would ride my bike to the grocery store and pick up anything that my mom would need. So that kind of attracted me. And it was also in the section for the big kids. The title of the book was Hiroshima. And I was able to read that book. And I was devastated. I was really, really devastated that people could be so cruel to one another. It's a book about the dropping of the bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So that was also the year that the oral polio vaccine was given to all of us. And that was also the year that we were asked the question of, what did you do over summer vacation? So first grade, probably the first week back, we were going to be sharing what we did over summer vacation. And as a kid that sat in the very back of the classroom because of the letter Z, I got to move up later, right, with a P, a little bit closer. But what we did over summer vacation, so I sat there, my feet, I was the shortest kid in class. Me and Susan were the shortest kids in the classroom. And I loved to play with Kathy and Patty and Sue. They were my friends then. So everyone came up and they told about all these travels that they had done. And it was great to hear all the places that people had gone. So I don't know who it was. Disneyland was almost brand new then, 7 years. they began to tell the most marvelous stories about their travels. Somebody went, I don't know, to Switzerland. Somebody else traveled all the way to New York. Another person went to Disneyland, and another person. And so then it was my turn. And so I went up, stood up straight. I was very courageous, very brave. And I proceeded to tell them about having gone to Disneyland. Oh yes, I saw Mickey Mouse. He has 2 big ears, right? Big whiskers, right? He's a mouse. And we walked all over the park, and we went there in the car, and it was so exciting. And everybody was so excited that I had gone to Disneyland. Wasn't it amazing? We gave everybody a round of applause. I was so happy. Then we lined up to go to recess. And we had to line up in alphabetical order. And I'm at the end of the line, and Mrs. Estel, with her long finger. And so I was nervous. She had me sit next to her desk in a chair, my feet dangling, and I was very proud of myself. And she goes, "You are never, ever to tell a lie again." Yeah, she knew. I hadn't gone to Disneyland. I barely knew what it was. I just picked pieces of what other kids had told me and invented the story. Not like I'm inventing it now, but invented it then. Definitely invented it then. Why? Why not? Where had I gone? My parents worked 12-hour days. My father was the handyman on an estate, and my mother was a domestic servant. We didn't take our first vacation as a family until I was 15 years old, and my father got us all in the car, station wagon that he'd bought, and we drove down to Mexico and visited our relatives. It was the first time they had been home in 25 years. Yeah. Since then, I've read about this thing called the tortilla curtain. See, we had lived in Salinas, and when you cross Highway 68 into the Monterey Peninsula, which is where we were living then, you cross the tortilla curtain. It basically refers to the fact that there are 2 different communities. And at that time, I would say that there were 3 different communities. There was the community in Salinas and its alrededores, its surroundings. There was a community that was surrounding Fort Ord, which was basically African American. And then there was the other community that we lived in. My teacher knew that I had told a lie because there wasn't anybody else in the classroom like me. It was just me, and down in kindergarten was my sister, and that was it. I'd only spent about 1.5 years learning English at that particular time. So when did I ride on an airplane the first time? The first time that my dad did, at 18. We rode to LA on a plane for the first time at 18. And then my father went to Europe for the first time at 80. And I will be going to Europe for the first time, to Spain, in March. What I will always treasure is Mrs. Stahl not humiliating me in front of the rest of my peers. I had the most wonderful teachers. I will forever be blessed because of the decisions that they made in the moment. Yeah, my teachers were just fantastic, fabulous. And that, colorín colorado, este cuento se ha acabado.
It's Christmas vacation 2011. I'm at Los Angeles International Airport, LAX. My husband, my daughter, my friend Gary, and his family were all traveling to Manzanillo, Mexico. 7 of us going. I haven't heard much about Manzanillo, but I do know that I'd seen a movie with Dudley Moore called 10. And I thought maybe if I had my hair braided, I could look like Bo Derek. In the meantime, I was not very happy about being at LAX. There's 2 airports that I avoid at all costs, LAX and JFK. But Gary's made the arrangements. He's got us his house reserved, and he told me there are no flights from San Francisco, SFO, directly to Manzanillo, so we need to go through LAX. So I'm walking through the airport, and we not only have to change planes, we have to change concourses, and our flight isn't even on United, it's on Mexicana. So if any of you have ever traveled on Mexicana, it's not a sure thing. It's not a sure thing we're gonna get there. But we get to the gate, and there's nobody there. It's really early in the morning. It's about 7:30 in the morning. And so we say, well, the flight's not till 9. Let's go have breakfast. On the way to go get breakfast, I started feeling like I'm really excited about my friends and my family and chilling in Mexico, but I'm looking for something more fulfilling than just a hangout vacation. Well, we get back to the ticket counter and the gate, and there's the flight. Oh, finally, the travel agent's there. They're the ticketing agent. And Gary says, here we are, 7 of us for Manzanillo, Mexico. Well, I'm sorry, sir, but there are only 6 seats left. What do you mean, 7 of us? And we've got these reservations confirmed. Sorry, sir, you got here too late. Well, where were you when we came before? Well, this went back and forth, and finally I just said, I volunteer. I'll catch up with you later. I've done it many times on flights where get bumped and then you catch the next flight. Well, I didn't take into consideration that it's 2 days before Christmas, and this flight to Manzanillo goes twice a week. Oh no, what am I gonna do? I'm gonna get on the phone and start calling all the airlines, and I reach in to my backpack and I take out my phone. Oh God, I only have 50% phone. I better be careful. Where's my charger? My charger's on my check bag on its way to Manzanillo. So I decide I need to go from ticket counter, I need to go to Delta, I need to go to American and try and get myself to Manzanillo. No luck, no luck, no luck. Finally, this Delta agent sees me and has heard my story, and she said, I can help you, dearie. Come on over here. So let's see, you want to get to Manzanillo. Okay, well, let me let you know, Delta does not fly directly from LAX to Manzanillo, but we'll get you to Mexico City. Oh, okay, let's see now. And you need to go through Denver. Denver? I'm going to Denver. I'm trying to get, it doesn't make any sense. I'm sorry, dear. Well, let's at least get you that flight. You'll get in around midnight. Okay, Ginger Park. Oh, dear, I've got some bad news for you. What's going on? That flight's been canceled. Oh, no, what's the lesson in this? The flight crew stuck in Detroit, bad weather back east. Let me see. Well, here, I can see you're so upset. So for sure, I'm going to give you a voucher for a room at the Holiday Inn because it's only 9 in the morning and the flights aren't going to go till late tonight. And then I'm going to give you a voucher for taxi, and I'm going to give you a voucher for food. But let's get you there. Okay, I finally found a flight for you. All right, dear. Okay, here you go. You're going to leave at 11:50 tonight on a red eye. To Mexico City? No, JFK. WTF? What the, am I going to JFK to, oh, I'm sorry, dear, that's all I can do. And you'll make the changes, and you'll fly through to Mexico City after you get off your plane JFK tomorrow morning, and then you'll get to Manzanillo. Okay, so I leave the airport pretty downhearted, and I take a taxi to the Holiday Inn. And they give me a room, and I guess they made arrangements for me to be able to go early in the morning, and I collapse. We've been at the airport, and I've been up since 3 in the morning, because, international flights, you have to check in early, and I'm really tired, and I lay down in these clean sheets, oh no, what if I get stuck in New York? These are the only clothes I have. And I start looking through my backpack. What do I have? A bathing suit. My husband says you always have to travel to Mexico with a bathing suit just in case they lose your backpack. So just in case. And I have a pair of panties just in case. And I have a notebook and a book and my trusty, really beat up Spanish American dictionary. And I need this and I love this. So what am I gonna do? I've got no clothes. What if I get... I'm gonna call my friends, Jerry and Vita. They don't live far from here. What do you mean to tell me, honey? Darling, you gotta be at LAX airport till midnight? Come on over here. We'll take care of you. And they do. Jerry and Vita, she and I are about the same size, except for shoes. So she gives me some leggings, and she gives me a sweater, and I stuff everything in my backpack, and then she gives me a size 7 shoe. Now I have on sandals, and I'm a size 5. But so she gives me several pairs of socks. I said, listen, something's better than freezing. And they give me a charger, and then they decide to get me stoned before I go back to the airport. You know that feeling when your psyche kind of shifts and all of a sudden something's looking really nice that wasn't so nice before. So I'm feeling no pain. I've got my charger, I've got clothes, I've got a ticket, and I get back to the airport. Now, LAX has really filled up then. People are pushing and people are absolutely nutso. It's December 23rd. They're trying to get to their places. There's one man at the counter. He's complaining that his dog has definitely got a ticket. Didn't they see he had his ticket? And then this other woman, I mean, the nerve of people. She's got a broken arm, but she's got 3 bags and she wants help. Me, I'm just feeling no pain. Oh, look at them. I know I've got a seat on the plane and I know I'm going to go to JFK. Anyway, I'm trying to learn the lesson in this. So I get up to the counter and he says, oh, your ticket's been flagged, miss. Oh, no, what's the matter? He says, no, we're going to escort you to your flight because the security line is really long. And I hadn't noticed it at that point. I said, oh, God, thank goodness. And he takes me through, and I'm at the front of the line, and I get to my gate. Boarding flight 309 to JFK. All boarding now. Will Ginger Parnes please come to the gate, agent? Oh, what's going on now? First class? I look out over that Delta agent and she winks at me. Well, this is pretty good, and I'm telling you, I've just seen the insanity of humanity, and now I've seen the kindness of strangers, as they say. And where do I fit in? I'll tell you where I fit in. Seat 3A in first class. And I settle into this seat, and it's big and leather. And I put the legs up, and I'm just sitting there. This is really a little stone too. And oh, champagne, yes. And I fall asleep. Next thing I know, we are now approaching JFK. We'll be letting you off on gate D9. Welcome to New York City. So I float all night. I'm really tired. I go clean myself up. It's 6:30 a.m. The flight's not till 9, but I go and I look at my ticket. Gate D9. I'm getting right back on that same plane I just got off of. What is the lesson in this? Anyway, not first class, but eventually I'm at least heading west again. We land in Mexico City. I've never been there, but the airport, oh no, I have a new airport to add to my list. Jostling and people with the Christmas presents and the trunks and all these things and bustling and bustling. Should I take a taxi and have a tour? I've got 4 hours. Take a tour of Mexico? No, I need something really to quiet me down. I'm gonna go find a cafe or a place to have lunch. I see a sign that says cafe, and then there's a Spanish word that I don't understand, but I go and start to go up to where that cafe is. And as I'm climbing the stairs to go up to the cafe, I see tools and dust and, oh no, the cafe is under construction. There's nobody there. I can't see him. Oh, I see a little boy. Hola, hola, hola. ¿Qué pasa? Restaurante de mi tío. Oh, it's your uncle's restaurant. What's your name? Julio. Oh, nice to meet you, Julio. ¿Habla inglés? Do you speak in English? No, estudio poco en la escuela. Well, today is your lucky day because I'm an English teacher. Come on, Julio. And I take him over and we dust off one of these banquettes and I sit him down next to me and I take out my notebook and a pen and my dictionary and I spend the next who knows how long talking to Julio in Spanish and English. And I teach him words. I teach him how to use the dictionary. He had never had a dictionary before. And I look up Spanish words. He looks up English. It was wonderful. It was so fulfilling. And all of a sudden I hear my flight's being called. Julio, honey, my airplane's leaving soon. I have to go. Oh, no, senora. And I see this little tear coming down his beautiful eyes. Yeah, Julio, and I make a quick decision. Julio, I have a gift for you, un regalo. Here is my Spanish-English dictionary. Oh, senora, gracias, senora. And I leave kind of teary myself, and as I go down and head off to the gate, I look back up, and Julio's waving goodbye to me. And after 5 flights, and 5,761 miles. I want to ask you, who do you think really had the lesson that day? Thank you.
Well, I was an Army brat. I grew up with my dad, who was Lieutenant Colonel William J. Clement Jr., a black Army officer, and we traveled all over the world and also domestically in the United States. One of my most favorite memories is of Bangkok, Thailand. I was at International School Bangkok there, and I was in 6th and 7th grade. It was a wonderful experience. There were kids there from all over the world. I had friends from different countries with different cultures, different languages, and they were all kids from military families and international diplomats. It was very different there. Not only the clientele who was there, the parents and the kids from all over the world, but also what we got to experience. I will never forget this field trip to a cobra farm. So in 8th grade, we all got to go to this cobra farm, and there was a big metal fence, metal enclosure, where all of these cobras were swirling on the ground in front of us. We were protected up to here. So we were watching, and the cobras would raise up, and then they would flare their collars like this to let us know how dangerous they were. And they would just come over to where we were standing, and they would look at us with naked hostility. It was frightening. They were being fed, and we got to see feeding time where 2 people came in. They were completely dressed in black rubber. And they had black rubber boots up to here, and they had black rubber gloves on, and they had these long poles with a prong at the end. They would catch the cobra underneath the neck, and then when they flared open, and they would take another hand and skewer a piece of meat from the bucket, stick it into the cobra's mouth, and then pull it down halfway to digest later. That was an amazing field trip. Well, after 2 years, it was time for us to go, and my dad was assigned to Command and General Staff College in Leavenworth, Kansas. Now, we had never been in the middle of the country before. It'd be an experience. I liked going to new places and meeting new people. So we all piled in the car. There were four of us, 2 boys and 2 girls, and my mom, who's Filipina. And we all traveled through the Philippines, through California, and then we drove all the way to Leavenworth, Kansas. Now, my dad and our family was staying on the base, but there was no high school on the base. So I had to go to high school in town. On my very first day, my mother walked me to the high school and registered me, and then I was walking down the halls with the metal gray lockers on the side and a sea of black and white faces coming at me, really different from ISB. I was looking around and I almost bumped into 4 big white jocks. I could tell they had their athletic coat on. And they stared at me and blocked my way. And one of them looked me up and down. "Are you Vietnamese?" And I was just getting ready to answer, "No, I'm black and Filipino." And then they brushed by me trying to knock my book bag off my shoulder. Well, I like to make friends, and I tried looking at people and tried to join some things, but I ended up eating alone for most of the first 2 months. And then Susie and Ann befriended me. They were in my homeroom and 2 other classes. And Susie asked me if I wanted to have lunch with them. I was so excited to be able to eat lunch with somebody. And we ate lunch together for the rest of that fall. And then it was the time for the Christmas dance. I was so excited to go to the dance. My mom bought me a beautiful new red dress with matching shoes, and my dad drove me to the gym where we were going to meet Susie and Ann. Susie and Ann and I went up the wooden bleachers and sat right up toward the front so we could see all of the couples right in front, the smattering of couples who were dancing to the live band. They were all white, dancing in front of the live band. But way in the corner of the gym, on the other side, all the black kids were dancing. And they were having a great time. They were just clapping, they were dancing and singing along. And I wanted so much to dance, but I didn't know anybody there. Well, I can tell you that Susie and Ann were white. And in Leavenworth, Kansas, what I had come to realize is there were very strict rules about who you could associate with. And like it or not, I was associated with Susie and Ann, the first people who had asked me to have lunch. I didn't know what that meant at the time. But there we were on the bleachers, and 2 black boys left the circle where the black kids were dancing, came over up the stairs, and they were walking over to me. And one of them said, "You want to dance?" I said, "Yes, I would love to." And just as I was standing up, they both looked at each other. Oh. They were surprised. They were backing up. They were looking at me curiously. I didn't know what to do. I sat back down, and I watched them go down the stairs, walk over to the black kids, and then a swarm of black boys encircled them, and they were talking animatedly, and they were pointing up to me, and then the black boys all looked up at me. And then a miracle happened. Another black boy came up the bleachers and said, "Hey, would you like to dance?" I said, "Oh, I would love to." He even took my hand to help me get down the bleachers. We walked across the gym floor to the circle, and we danced. It was glorious. And then another black boy asked me to dance, and we danced. And then I was going to go back to the bleachers, but then I got asked to dance again. I danced every single dance. It was so exciting. And then came intermission. I was looking up for my friends, Susie and Ann, and I was looking for them on the bleachers, but they weren't on the bleachers. They were already on the floor, and they were coming straight at me, unsmiling. Susie grabbed my arm and started pulling me. Ann grabbed my other arm, and they both pulled me into the girls' bathroom. As soon as we got in the girls' bathroom, Susie whirled on me. She said, "Why are you dancing with those niggers?" I thought I had been hit in the face. I was furious. I said, "Because I am a nigger." You would have thought I knocked her down. She stared at me, and her face turned purple and red, and the color rose up to her blonde pixie roots. She said, "No, you are not. No, you are not." And then she looked at Anne. Anne looked at her and said, "This can't be happening. She can't be." And then they both started to back me into the corner. I pushed past them, and I opened the door, and I got out into the hall, and I breathed. And I went back into that gym, and I went back over to the black circle where I danced every single dance. And then my dad picked me up. Well, he had been reassigned after Commandant General Staff College. And that Christmas break was when our family was to return to his new assignment, which was the San Francisco Bay Area at the Presidio. We all piled into the car. I was never so happy to leave a place in my life. We drove across the country. And when I saw those beautiful hills and the Golden Gate Bridge, I knew I was not in Kansas anymore. And I was so happy that I had left those poisonous snakes in Leavenworth, Kansas. And I hoped that I wasn't going to see any more poisonous snakes in California.
It's cold, it's dark, and there are 3 little girls huddled on a platform, train platform. The youngest one, who is almost 2, is crying. And Noni, my sister, is 9, and I'm almost 11. And I'm trying really hard to keep them kind of in what I thought was a family circle. The train station is almost empty, and it is very late. And what we were doing was, our mother had died, maybe 4 weeks, maybe 4 months before then, but when you're that age, excuse me, it's hard kind of to keep that in mind. And we're being sent from California to stay for a year with my grandmother in Chicago. And I look kind of down the platform, and I can see my father at the very end of the platform, and he's giving the conductor some money. And after he gets the conductor some money, he turns around, and he's quite a ways away from us, and he waves and says goodbye. And he turned around and walked away. Well, there we were, 2 years old, 9 years old, and I was about 10 and a half at the time. And the conductor gets us seated in the train. And my little sister Cookie, who had just turned 2, is so terrified that the minute the train starts, she threw up. And Noni and I just looked at her, and that was really when the first angel appeared. And the angel was disguised as a short, plump, 60-ish woman with curly hair. And she walked up to us and she said, "Let me help." And she pulled the cord in the car for the conductor. And the conductor got there, and she said to Cookie, my little sister, who is still crying and now is covered in vomit, "Come on, I'm going to take you, I'm going to help you." And they go off to the bathroom. And when they come out, Cookie she looked like a little teddy bear, because this woman this angel who had appeared was plump, and she had a sweater on, and what she had done was she had taken Cookie's clothes off and washed them, but she had put her sweater on Cookie and buttoned it down the front so it was on the ground, rolled up the sleeves, and Cookie, for the first time, was just smiling from ear to ear. And she said, would you like to stay with me tonight? And Cookie just beamed and said, yes, I would. And the next thing I knew, I looked over, and this is getting very late, is that Cookie's angel and she are cuddled up together. Her dress, by the way, that the woman has washed, is on the seat drying next to her, and they are sound asleep with Cookie in their arms. So my sister, Noni, was next to me, and she had fallen asleep. And I tend, from the time I was very little to live in a fantasy land. I mean, I love fantasy. And when you're little, sometimes it's safer in fantasy than reality. So I'm sitting there, and the train is going, and I'm kind of just part of that train, part of that feeling. And if you've ever ridden on a train, what you know is that you have this sense of going forward at the same time you're kind of going sideways. And I was just immersed in it, and the sound of the train, which I loved, which was, and I started to fall asleep, and I would wake up every once in a while because I would hear the, and it was going through, I guess, a crossing, and then all of a sudden it would be. Well, I woke up when the light was just coming into the cars. And wherever we were, I think in the mid-plains, it was all farmland, and it had snowed. And as I sat there with this wonderful feeling and hearing the train, I watched as the sun came up, and it turned the snow kind of pink at first. And then the snow turned kind of yellow, and then just blazing white. And what happened was, as we were going, stubble would come up through the snow, and for some reason, almost every piece of stubble had a red-winged blackbird sitting on the top. And I just, I remember feeling basically kind of part of that train. And people started to wake up, and my sister next to me woke up, and they were all going to get. They had baskets of food, and they had bags of food. And Noni, my sister, the 9-year-old, said, I'm hungry. I said, yeah, me too. And that's when the second angel appeared. And he was very tall, a very tall black man with a white jacket that was starched. It had one of those Nehru collars and big buttons, and he had the sweetest kind of smile I had ever seen, and a very soft voice. And he said, you children need to eat. Now, I'm going to be right here while you do your necessaries. And Cookie's angel, my little sister's angel, came over and took us into the bathroom where we did our necessaries. We came out, and we must have looked like some kind of a parade, because Cookie stayed with this woman, but our angel said, okay, you follow me. And here he is, this very, very tall, handsome black guy with these two raggedy looking little kids behind him, and we really did look raggedy. And so we walked through the cars, and I mean, by now, I'm thinking we're on a big adventure, because I'm loving walking through these cars. And people were waking up as we walked through the cars, and we're watching them, and as I remember, we walked through 2 or 3 cars, and then he opened the door, and we stepped into this car, and it was like something out of a fairy tale to me. We stepped in, and it seemed like it was wider than the cars we were in, but it couldn't have been. And it was lined with booths, and they had tables in the middle, and all the tables were set with white linen and crystal glasses, silverware. I looked at it, and I remember it was warm, and there were curtains on the windows, and it smelled like bacon. And what you could hear was kind of the clink of the coffee cups and saucers. And this is all girded with that wonderful railroad sound of, and it just, I can remember just relaxing into it and had never seen anything like that. So our angel said, now you children sit there, I'm going to be back. And he pointed to a booth, and I slid in one side and my sister slid in the other side, and Noni's looking back from where we came from, and I'm looking forward, and it's snowing out now. And I remember that for the first time in a very long time, I felt safe. I mean, it was this feeling of protection, and we started to laugh, and I said to her, you know, put your hand on the window, and the windows were cold. And I said, we can scoop the cold in. We were just playing and kind of laughing, and our angel came out, and he's pushing a cart. And it was a cart, and it had a big silver dome on the top. And he picked up the dome, he stopped at our table, and he picked up the dome, and first he put in front of each of us a steaming bowl of oatmeal. And then he put a plate of hot buttered toast with a little pot of raspberry jam. And then he put a glass of orange juice. And then he was wonderful. He bowed to us, and then he picked up big scoops of brown sugar and put it on top of each of our things of oatmeal. We watched it melt down in there. He poured cream on it, and he said, now you children eat. And eat this all up. It felt like we were in fantasy land. I don't think that anything better could have ever been served to us or served in that way. Well, that was many years ago, and I actually do not remember any more of the trip. I don't remember getting to Chicago. I don't remember meeting my grandmother, but I took several things away from that trip. And one was that angels don't come with blue eyes and blonde hair. Some angels are short and plump with gray hair, and some angels are tall and black with beautiful smiles.